Well, hey there, Discovery Church. For those of you that love to keep a pretty good pulse on what happens around here outside of a typical Sunday morning, or maybe your life group or a study group that you're a part of, would love to give you now a little bit of an update of some of the things that have been going on, particularly ahead of our next Feast in Finances, which will be on Sunday, July 28th. So if you can mark your calendars for July 28th, after second service, we'll have a big potluck hangout, and it will be a chance. We'll have some more updates that will be coming then, but largely to have some Q&A time starting then. So before we get into too many of the other details, wanted to make sure it's always clear to us that this is an elder-run church, and our elders are nominated and elected from the local congregation. New to our team this year is Randy Smith and Katie Brown, who have been uploading at the speed of light, trying to get caught up to speed with everything that the elders have been working on. So Katie and Randy, we are so glad that you are a part of the team. Okay, let's jump in. Let's begin with a financial update. Wanted to really just give us a comparison of second quarters from this second quarter compared to last year, just so we have a little bit of a frame of reference. I'll move quickly through these things and know that there's some more information that might be on your screen, as well as you can always just reach out, and the QR codes on the back of your chairs will also give you a little bit more information. But last year at this time for quarter two, we had an income of about $392,000 plus some change. This year we are looking at $425,000, so that's a really great increase, some really good things to see. Our budget income, we were hoping to be more around $456,000. So that's good to note. We're short by just a little bit there. Now, when we look at our expenses compared to last year's second quarter, last year about $471,000, this year $428,000. So those expenses are also down. Again, our budget, we expected our expenses to be more like $456,000, so off about $25,000 there. Cash on hand, our goal is always to be 14 weeks ahead. Last year at this time, we were about 9.5 weeks up. This year, we're about 14 weeks up. There are some things that hide in that number, which we'll talk about as we continue chatting, but that is also another really great sign of health. So here's some big takeaways that I think for those of us that are financially minded and want to know what's going on. Our income was about $31,000 under what we expected. However, our expenses were also about $28,000 under what we expected. So the difference there is about $3,000. That's a pretty acceptable margin of error that I'll take any day of the week in a church of our size. Another thing to keep looking at is the goal for our offering for income is about $135,000 a month. If we're hanging out there, we're really financially healthy. Currently, we're hanging out at $129,000 a month, which is up $3,000 a month from last year. So good to see that increase, and still plenty of room for us to grow. And one other thing, just to make sure that this is clear, it's not necessarily a report of like nothing to see here, everything's great. Particularly in quarter two, we've had a couple months where things have been real roller coastery. We had one month where our income was under $100,000, which for us was just a real big shock. And then another month where things were way up. And so we're well aware that in church world, it is a roller coaster, and that these big ebbs and flows, they all kind of begin to even out. So we do want to keep an eye on those things. If we continue to see more months where the roller coaster is riding down than up, that is cause for at least raising of an eyebrow. But for right now, all of those peaks and valleys are evening out. Some takeaways for us to keep in mind too here are that in December of 2024, our mortgage will actually go up. And the reason for that is because our mortgage is currently actually down. We're paying interest only because of the project that we've been doing with the Barn Door Coffee Shop. Once we get to December of 2024, that goes back up to a full principal and interest mortgage, which will be an increase of about $10,000 a month. Our elders last year elected to set aside $120,000, really to then be spread out $10,000 a month for the calendar year of 2025, just to buy us a little bit of buffer so that we can grow back into that full payment of a mortgage. So when you look at we're more than 14 weeks ahead, that's great. Know that that's one of the amounts that's built into that. Some of the other amounts that are built in, there's some smaller projects around. We would love to get a road sign, a digital road sign out on the road, really just as a way to better communicate with the community around us what we're up to, and to make sure they know that they're invited. And also the basement is in need of a huge facelift, particularly in children's ministry. So there's a bunch of work that we're going to continue to do around there, and those finances are all wrapped up in that current surplus for us. As a church family, I would just ask for a couple things, regardless of if you're a financial-minded person or otherwise. The process of holding finances in a church are the same as they are holding finances at home. It is not something where we find security in having a huge pile of money that we're sitting on. And it's also not something that we want to be willy-nilly about. It's something that we want to be deeply prayerful about and deeply generous about and deeply expectant over. And so would just continue to ask that you would pray for our church family, that we would be people both in how we steward our corporate finances as well as our individual finances, that we would be people who steward well, and that we would remember that this is all God's money, and we should have the courage to risk where he invites us to risk, and also the wisdom to know when to hold back. And particularly, I would ask you to pray for wisdom and discernment for our elders and for our staff as they are making decisions surrounding our corporate finances. It is a process that we like to make sure there's a lot of us that are thinking and praying together, and they're not just decisions that we make out of good old-fashioned human wisdom and intellect, but things that we make out of prayer. And so your prayers over our prayers are hugely welcome. And thanks for those of you that pray consistently for our staff and elders. All right, next up, we had about a year ago, a handful of folks who said we'd really like to see an audit or an internal controls review, just a big scrub of how are the finances, how secure are things looking around here in the world of finances. And so this, in the last few months, that internal controls review has been completed by a company called CRNG. And they came up with a handful of recommendations for us, none of which I think are like red alert. We're like, these are big, big problems, but definitely some things that we're taking to heart and we're going to be moving on. And I think by our July time together at Feast and Finances, we'll have more to report on how these things are progressing. But here's kind of some of the 4 big bullet points that were takeaways. We have right now a weekly count spreadsheet for our finances that one person knows how to use and how to change if there's a change needed. Obviously, if something happens to that person, that puts us in a big lurch. So increasing the number of people who understand systems like that would be huge. Reviewing and determining automated thresholds for our larger bills. This whole idea really comes from the fact that right now when a huge bill comes in, say for our health insurance, it really requires the signature of one person to pay for that. But for these much larger bills that come in, what would be our threshold that we want to determine? Let's get 2 people's signatures on that just as an added layer of security. So that's something that we'll be working on. We also were encouraged, our capital assets are something that we're supposed to report on every year. And right now we really don't have a system to figure out how to do that, mainly because to sit down once a year and think through all of the assets that we have around the barn is an overwhelming process. So this recommendation actually comes with the idea of break it up and every 3 years be reviewing a different section of the church, but keep those lists updated. And it's a really great and palatable way that we can actually keep those lists going, which we thought was a great idea. And finally, we do have some blank checks that we keep here at church. They are behind a locked door and in an area that's highly secure in the church that only a handful of people have access to, and only a couple people actually have the ability to be authorized signers for. But we were encouraged because of their location to add even one more layer of security, which is really no problem at all. So that was another thing that we felt like would just be a really easy shift. If you are interested in having the full report in front of you so that you can see in detail all of the recommendations that CRNG made for us, you can absolutely reach out to me at zach@dc2.me. I would love to send you that full report and you can see what you think. All right, our land use planning team. For those of you that consistently wonder and pray about our affordable housing project, just a reminder that last year we shared that our partnership with Habitat for Humanity, Habitat actually had to back away for financial reasons. And so last summer, that really put us in a tailspin of, okay, what are we gonna do here? And our friends over at the Broomfield Housing Alliance, who have been awesome, applied on our behalf for a grant with CU School of Architecture. And last September, we had a group come out to perform what's called a charrette with us. This was a handful of master's level architect students and also their mentors and some folks who work in architecture and civil engineering firms here around the Denver metro area. And for 3 days, we sat down with essentially the blank canvas of the 18 acres that surrounds Discovery Church and had a great time thinking about how can we better use this land. So before I get into those details, just wanted to honor the team that has been spending a lot of time and energy thinking and praying over these projects. For our sake as a church family to know, this team is being led by Linnea Stewart, who in her own right is an architect and really understands the water that we're now beginning to swim in this affordable housing project. We are contracting with her to effectively be our project manager and then lead this team of volunteers, which includes Gail Fleisch and Dave Little and Nancy Movick, Sharon Vickers and Steve Williams. To all of you, thank you so much for the work that you guys do to love our church family and to see this affordable housing project come to fruition. Ultimately, this project will be looking at increasing the number of units. The Habitat drawings had 12 units. We want to increase that number quite a bit, actually. So here's some pictures from that day. And as you can see, just lots of drawing. In some of these, we're getting just on the 18 acres and coming up with different creative ideas. Some of these drawings are looking at actual structural plans and how many bedrooms and how big are those bedrooms in these structures. It was really, really fun. Now, this next picture I'm going to show you is some drawings over the 18 acres. The whole idea here is that we're not attached to any one of these right now. These were just some ways of helping us think outside the box of different iterations of how this project could go. And here's just a few. I mean, there are so many more of these, but here's some other drawings of how we think that we could utilize this property for an affordable housing project, and then some other fun things. Generally, what you're seeing here is a move of realizing the affordable housing project will best live for lots of different reasons on the eastern parcel where the Habitat project was already planned to be. And there are some really fun and creative ideas that flow towards what we could do then on the western half where the barn currently sits. So for those of you that love this project, we just really encourage you to pray. Here's some of the goals that this team has. We really want whatever we build in this affordable housing parcel to be an intergenerational community that drives interpersonal connectedness through multi-purpose services and programs. If you're like, that sounds like a mouthful of words that probably took a few months to curate, you're right. And if you can go back and read through that a couple times, that will be the guiding light that we want to pursue. And really, as we're thinking through structures and what we're actually going to build, we do want to make sure that there's flexibility there, that what we build doesn't pigeonhole the whole project right away into something that can't flex in the future if the needs change. But we really do want to make sure that whatever we built is built to meet the highest needs populations that live in and around the Broomfield community. All right, Barn Door Coffee. For those of you that have been wondering what's going on with that project, are we open to the public yet? What's going on? We did wrap up all the construction this past winter. Through the spring, we've been updating all of our policies and procedures. We brought on Stacy Blund to be our Barn Door Coffee manager. And since then, a lot of what we're now waiting on, everything is pretty much done except for final licensing moves with the city. We really think we're about 98% of the way there, and we're expecting that any time we're going to get the green light. Once we get that green light from the city, the idea is that we'll have a soft open, that it'll be open a few days a week. It will be run predominantly by volunteers, and we'll use those first few months just to work out any kinks in the system. And then as we start to realize, okay, this is how we can work the best, this is how we can really deliver some excellence when it comes to coffee and a coffee shop experience, then we'll begin looking at how can we scale this up? What might this look like in the world of having more employees, or is this something that we need to keep as a volunteer-run thing? And just some reminders about this. This coffee shop was not built to be a moneymaker for the church. This is not a supplemental income type of a project. It is primarily built because in our culture here in America, the coffee table is a place where relationships get built. It's where discipleship happens. Starbucks famously coined the term, it's the third space. It's not home and it's not work, but it's the next place that I go to. And to have that space be inside a church is such a gift to the community around. Barn Door Coffee really derives its name from this idea that for some people, this will be the door through which they walk into the church. And as our general contractor, Steve Tarnowski, famously said, some people need the chair in the coffee shop way more than they need the chair in the auditorium on a Sunday morning. And we really think that it can be the doorway into a relationship with Jesus. We will be watching the performance of the coffee shop just to better understand financially how things are flowing before we have any conversations on where maybe potential profit flows. We just want to see how this boat floats before we start promising what we're going to do with it. So stay tuned on that. Now, finally, one additional thing. I think it's important for us to keep in mind that as we're looking at all of these food licensing things, there will be some things that this Barn Door Coffee Shop will invite us to adjust to. One of those things is that whereas right now we're used to putting crock pots or food all over the place, now we will have different locations where we'll have to move those things and different rules that we will need to abide by. So just to keep in mind, while the building may be ours, Barn Door Coffee is really a location that is shared with the community around us. Best to see that as something that we intentionally built to share, not something that is ours. All right, this next one may be new to some of us, but to others, you've seen this coming for a long time. Pre-COVID, we had signed a contract with a cell phone contracting company to build a cell phone tower here on the property. It will be just off the northeast corner of the barn, kind of behind where the dumpsters are right now, if you can picture that area. It will look like a gigantic silo, and this is a project that will really be moving pretty quickly as we get into these next couple months. It is a project, too, that they are offsetting the costs, and there's a subsidy that we get every single month, about $2,500 from the cell phone company to be there. And they've been paying that because of the contract that we'd written actually for the last couple years. So just a heads up, if you see some big building going on and a big silo going up, that is not the Children and Family Ministries building. That is a cell phone tower, and we're glad that they are going to be here. And finally, saving the best for last, one of the things that I loved that came out of the series that we did celebrating Discovery's 25-year anniversary and birthday was that when the land was purchased here, and then again later as the barn was being built, folks would just come and pull their cars onto the property and walk around and pray. And whether they were praying that a barn would someday be built here, or whether they would be praying that by the time the barn was built, that there would actually be people that would come here, folks would just come and pray. And it's something that I thought, man, we need to continue doing that as a church community. And so what you'll begin to see as you're coming into church now, right next to where the plow is by the front walkway, will be a little placard that will just say walking prayers on it. And for those that want to, there'll be a QR code that you can scan that will just bring up, here's a couple different things that you can be praying for as you walk around the perimeter of the property. My ask would be this: for those of you that call Discovery home, would you commit to once a month clicking into that, and whether you're by yourself, whether you're with your whole family after church on a Sunday, just taking some time to walk around and pray. And those prayers will be intentionally crafted, that they're not just navel-gazing and praying just for Discovery Church and what's going on here, but that we're praying for the community around us and the world around us, and really praying that the kingdom would look here on earth as it does in heaven. So again, for those of you that love this kind of information, there will be more time for questions and answers as we get to the official Feast and Finances on July 28th. Thanks so much for watching. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to Zach at dc2.me. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks, friends.